Welcome to MrCScience.com's video on carbon dioxide. Earlier videos we talked about the composition of the atmosphere. Number one gas in the atmosphere was nitrogen, an inert gas. Then we have some water vapor, oxygen, argon, and then we got to carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide's got kind of a bum rap lately as far as global warming comes into concern, but we'll talk about that in a second. First of all, let's talk about what is carbon dioxide and why is it so important. Well, carbon dioxide is important for plants. Now, why do we care? We're animals. I mean, yeah, sure, I gotta eat my vegetables, but I really want to. What if it was all just meat? Um, let's take a look. Plants carry out an incredibly important process called photosynthesis that allows us to be alive on Earth. Plants take carbon dioxide along with some water and some energy from the sun, and they make this long chemical C6H12O6, also known as glucose or sugars. Plants make sugars and release oxygen into the atmosphere. Um, So they take the energy from the sun, convert it into food, and we all eat plants or eat things that have eaten plants, so we get the energy from the sun that way. Without plants, we couldn't get the energy from the sun. We quickly run out of any useful energy on Earth, and we would all die. You also notice this oxygen here, this O2 it creates is important to keep our oxygen levels where they need to be. Now, it's interesting when an animal eats a plant, just the opposite happens. It takes oxygen. Remember, you need oxygen to break down this food, C6H12, and it gives us carbon dioxide, water, and energy. So plants are very important for this process, allowing for life on Earth. The next thing carbon dioxide is partially responsible for is the greenhouse effect. Now, carbon dioxide, along with methane, water vapor, and ozone, are all called greenhouse gases. What these greenhouse gases do is they help trap infrared heat in our atmosphere to keep all the heat from escaping into space and life freezing to death. Um, in your book, you've got a very good example of this on page 33, figure 2.4, the greenhouse effect. Just to make it interesting, I'm going to draw. Okay, so grab my tool here. So let's draw our sun up here in the corner. I appear to be having some memory issues slowing my drawing down, but that's right. Okay, so we got our sun. Under our sun, we've got the Earth. Here's some nice continents. A little ship out in the ocean there floating around. Okay, so what happens from the sun now? Between the sun and the Earth, first of all, there's a heck of a lot of nothing called space, but there's also a blanket over the Earth that I'm going to draw much thicker than it is in real life of the atmosphere. All those gases we were talking about, that nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor mixture called our atmosphere. So one of the things we get from the sun besides light is heat in the form of infrared radiation that comes from the sun, goes down to Earth, heats up the Earth, and actually heats up the atmosphere a little bit as well, and keeps us warm, allows warm enough for liquid water, which allows life to flourish on our planet. Now, one thing with when you heat something up, it will radiate off to the cool area. Space is very cold, so this infrared radiation radiates back off into space. Now, if we didn't have an atmosphere here, it would all radiate off into space and we all die. But we have these greenhouse gases. Number one amongst them is probably water vapor, is the biggest greenhouse gases. What these greenhouse gases do is they reflect or trap some of that heat and reflect it back in again, so that not all the heat goes out. This is good because it keeps us warm. Now, scientists are worried that if this delicate balance isn't kept, if they keep too much heat in here, the Earth will heat up, which makes sense. There are feedback mechanisms and fun things like that called weather and clouds and other things that help kind of balance this. But an example of out of control greenhouse effect is the planet Venus. Planet Venus has a very dense cloud cover that traps a lot of the heat inside. The planet Venus is the atmosphere is hot enough to melt lead, so it's very hot. So yeah, so scientists are worried about these. Now, what's interesting about this water vapor? You know what water vapor is? We've talked about it before. What is the science of water vapor? Meteorology or weather. How good are scientists at predicting weather? They're getting better, but they're still not quite there. Ozone up in the upper atmosphere has some effect, we understand, but ozone isn't really changing much. There used to be a concern about uh, chlorofluorocarbons in hairspray and stuff like that affecting the ozone layer. We've since learned that they really don't get up to the ozone layer, so they can't really affect it except around the poles where we'll read about the polar vortexes and pushing that stuff up and down. Methane. Methane, more commonly known as cow farts. Methane gas is a known greenhouse gas. You'll read about all these, but most of these, weather's probably the number one. A good example of this is on the coast. If you've ever been near the ocean, you notice that it's humid. You got a lot of water vapor in the air. Because of that, if you compare day to night temperatures, the change isn't a lot. They do change as the sun goes down, but that water vapor in the air traps that heat and it doesn't get super cold. If you've ever been to a desert environment is extremely dry and not a lot of water vapor in the air. You'll notice the days tend to be very warm, but the nights get extremely cold because you don't have that greenhouse effect, that water vapor trapping that heat in. So water vapor is a major greenhouse gas, and because of the way that it interacts with the weather and things like that, it tends to change things. Now, that being said, is global warming happening? Yes, the earth is getting warmer. The question isn't is it happening, but is it man-made? Is man causing it? Is man's increase in carbon dioxide output causing global warming? That's where a lot of scientists disagree. So, media tends to portray, yes, global warming is happening, it's a catastrophe, we're all going to die. There's a lot of things that say, hey, as we've increased carbon dioxide, we haven't seen global warming change at the same rate. One thing that we have seen that was kind of interesting is global warming has kind of followed the pattern of sun intensity with sunspots. As we get more sunspots on the sun, we get more solar intensity, more radiation coming in, warms you up. So now I don't know everything about this, and you shouldn't just take my word from it. You should follow the science. A good place if you're interested in learning a bit more about this that is a Christian perspective, but does a pretty good job of trying to be as unbiased as possible, is answersingenesis.org. If you visit that site, they can give you lots of good data from lots of scientists in the field to tell you what's going on. So if you have any questions on all this, feel free to drop me a line at Mr. C at MrCScience.com. Thank you.